So in the bio column, I want to share with you some things and just notice if one or two or three of these might relate to someone that you know, someone you're thinking about. So the top 8 temper triggering cognitive traits are weak inferential learning of coping skills. I mentioned that these are all bio column things, partially except for the number 8. So non-modeling. So the child who has social skill deficits or learning differences might not learn inferentially from the world from trial and error. And so they have a hard time naturally developing their coping skills. And that's one avenue that might lead them to struggle with frustration or anger. The next two often are bookends and go together. We have prolonged egocentrism. Let me explain that. Egocentrism is very natural, as an expected developmental marker and trait. Think of babies who, when they are hungry, what do? They cry, right? So baby cries, they have tension, they cry, and then their environment, the world, gives them tension relief. And so a baby approaches the world in terms of getting my needs met. You know, I have a dirty diaper, cry, hopefully someone will intuitively know what I need, clean me up, I feel better. So it's tension relief, decreasing tension. But importantly, it has to do with getting my way. I need to get my needs met. This is normal in child development. It lasts strongly through age 3 and age 4, and then it begins to wane up through age 7 or 8 in typical development. Many kids who come to me for therapy, particularly around frustration tolerance or anger, still have what I call prolonged egocentrism. So it could be age 10, 15, if they're still, if you know an adult who rages, most likely it has to do with, I can't take this frustration, I'm not getting my needs met, and boom, and that's the big reaction. So we have to help them maybe take a different perspective and learn a broader perspective, zoom in and zoom out. Okay, so let's say that there's someone who has prolonged egocentrism, and then you stack number 3 on top of that, cognitive rigidity. People can be inflexible for reasons stemming both from the bio column and the social column. Some people are wired in an inflexible way. And many of those bullet points that I mentioned, executive functioning, the ADHD suite, kids with social skills challenges on the autism spectrum can be wired in a more rigid way where they're not as flexible. Certainly people with learning differences also. So there are a lot of avenues towards inflexibility from the bio column. And then from the environment, if someone has a lot of stressors in their life, a lot of conflict, not a lot of support, and so they can also become pretty brittle as a coping skill. Okay, if my world and my feelings feel out of control, then I'm gonna lock down. I'm gonna say, no, it has to be my way, right? I'm gonna control what I can control. And you might even say that I'm gonna over control, right? I'm gonna hyper control everything so that I don't lose it. Well, what happens as soon as the world demands flexibility and you can't control it? There you have the kindling for a meltdown. So inflexibility is huge. We need to work on flexibility of mind in order to help people not be as angry. The next 2, 4 and 5 are companions. Ineffective assertiveness skills. People who have weaker assertiveness skills don't know really how to stick up for themselves well. So you'll see we have a slide with a coping skill for that. So they wind up on one of 2 extremes. Either they choose the path of least resistance and they silence themselves so they don't assert themselves, which makes them passive. Or in the other extreme, they wind up asserting themselves, but they've been holding it in, and then they explode. So their assertiveness is actually aggressive, which defeats their purpose. They may not get their needs met because they've now squashed the person that they're trying to get help from, or crushed them with their anger, with their words, or with their hopefully nothing else, but nothing physical. So ineffective assertiveness can lead to frustration and anger. I'm a deer in the headlights. I'm not getting my needs met. Frustration rises. That's kindling. Its cousin is number 5, which is weak problem-solving skills. This comes out of the ADHD suite, that executive functioning. And problem-solving involves first the recognition that something is wrong, right? Uh-oh, there's an obstacle here. Something is not right. Then secondly, the effective problem solver starts to generate options, right? You get, plan A, plan B, plan C. Might this work? Might this work? Might this work? But our gang, who we're talking about tonight, those kids who have high frustration or meltdown, if they're lucky, if they're fortunate, they generate one problem or one solution, and then perhaps they try that same solution, but they try it harder and harder and harder, louder and louder. And so it's trying to, shove that square peg in the round hole. And then when it finally doesn't work, they don't have plan B or C or D. And so that can be a trigger for higher frustration. So we need to develop their problem-solving skills. Okay, next, number 6, black and white thinking. People who are black and white thinkers have only 2 mental boxes or cubbies into which they can organize their experiences. So everything's all great. This is the best. It's all bad. It's the worst. Fair, unfair. This task is impossible. It's simple. It's easy. So you can see that this profile is that people tend to break it down into such extremes that it actually causes sort of swings of emotion. So the person could be having a perfectly fine day because things were okay, and then they lumped everything into the all good category. So they're skipping along through their day, and then one thing goes wrong, right? They only have one other cubby besides great, all bad, and so they have to act in accordance. If they think it's all bad, they're going to react the same way, really intensely, freak out city. So black and white thinking is an absolute, is fuel for the roller coaster of life, up and down, happy, sad, right? Joyous, explosive. So we need to work on some shades of gray. I'm going to share ways to come up with that, to develop that. Heart-whole thinking is code for not being able to see the forest for the trees. People who over-focus on details and miss the big picture. So you might know the person who argues a detail to death, and arguing about rules or something that's fair, and they argue that point, missing the big picture that if I stop arguing, we'll get this done faster. You're trying to get the child to do homework. The child says, no, I don't want to do this. I want to focus on this. I want to do this. And they're so focused on the argument about yes or no, am I going to do homework, that they argue for 45 minutes, and then they do their 7 minutes of homework, and homework took like 55 minutes. So the big picture is, if I just say yes and do my 7 minutes of homework, I'm going to get to my fun faster. So helping kids to really see the big picture will help them as well. Lastly, number 8, the hypersensitive brainstem, fight, flight, freeze. And this is the second time I mentioned it. It must be important, this brainstem. So let's actually go there in a minute. Brainstem is if you take your finger and point to the back of your head, okay, you'll feel a notch. Feel free to do it. We might see you doing it, but we're all gonna look funny together. Feel that notch in the back of your head. Right inside there is the very top of your brainstem, so you can feel it. So right back there, at the very top of your spine, your neck, is the brainstem, the most ancient primitive part of our brains. Mammals have it, even lizards have it, and that's responsible for preserving the organism, for keeping it safe, keeping it alive. So it has that instinctive response of fight, flight, run away, or freeze, like possums play dead. And we still have that today, and we're going to talk about the hypersensitive brainstem in 2 slides. So let's really get into the actual coping piece now. You have enough background. Here's what kids need. We need to destigmatize and decriminalize everyday anger. Kids need a framework to understand their levels of frustration. We tend to lump it all into one thing, into one category, into one understanding, and that causes everyone to use the wrong coping strategy at the wrong time. And if you use the wrong one for the wrong situation, that's what can escalate a child to greater levels of frustration or anger. Kids are going to need awareness of the dino brain effect, and the dino brain is the brainstem we're going to talk about. Caregivers need to develop for kids a compassionate meltdown safety plan. We need to stop being reactive and start get proactive. We have to really start to think about, what do we need to do, and what do we need to know? What does my child need to know, since he or she has this little habit of melting down? Let's plan for this now. All of a sudden, it won't be quite such a shock, and cause us to act out impulsively ourselves and trying to support it. Kids need safe places to get out and process anger and all feelings. And lastly, and actually most importantly, they need prevention. These are the coping skills, cognitive behavioral coping skills, so that kids can better understand the world. They will be able to better rationalize their experiences so that they don't flare up into such extreme anger, and they'll be able to stay engaged with the world, just like those gears showed in that first one.